Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Welcome. Today we are going to be covering everything that is known about Carol Christian Poell's 2004 Spring-Summer Men's Show entitled Mainstream, Downstream. CCP is such an automatic figure in the world of fashion. There is so little that is actually known about this man and his work, and so little of what is known is understood publicly in a useful way. But everything that he makes is so compelling looking that we almost can disregard this need to understand. We look at these pictures and we feel like they are important, even if we don't fully understand why. But folks, that is what I am here for. I have spent an enormous amount of time researching, and I have gathered every single tiny sliver of information that I could, and I'm now ready to bring you the complete guide to mainstream downstream. Are you ready? This is like literally something that I have wanted to do since I started this channel. I am so excited to make this episode. If you're just now finding the channel, I do deep dive analyses of runway collections in order to uncover the references, the stories, and the artfulness behind designer clothes. If that's something that you like, you should subscribe and dig around. Okay, here's the thing. Wait, what? There's a disclaimer? Yes, there's two actually. Disclaimer number one. Mainstream Downstream is a very early collection by Carol. A lot of the things that he's known for in his body of work are not present in this collection. Things like dead-end jackets and chain stitching and Squarter the horse, a fencing jacket. Those are all not happening in this collection. So all that to say, you can definitely expect some more Carol content coming at some point in the future. Disclaimer number two. You have no idea how much I love to be corrected. If you know of something that I didn't know about for this collection, or that I didn't phrase correctly, or that I lied about, please add that in the comments below. The only thing that I ask is that if you're going to do that, please cite a source so that we are not adding quarters to the rumor jar. Thank you. Okay. The most recognizable runway show by arguably one of the greatest designers that is currently living. Let's go. Mainstream Downstream is one of the most household names of the menswear sartorial canon. It was shocking and radically different then, and even now in the golden era of DIY runway shows, it still holds up as being a striking and captivating spectacle while still maintaining a stark, deadpan simplicity. To this day, along with other massively influential runway shows like Riot, 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 Margiela's Spring-Summer 1990 show, Comme des Garçons' Lumps and Bumps collection, Mainstream Downstream is still thrown onto the mood boards of today. For those who know their fashion history, Carol Christian Poell's Spring-Summer 2004 collection is a waypoint for unachievable, distant, dark coolness. Let's talk about the name. Mainstream Downstream doesn't define anything about the collection itself. It's a statement of rebellion. Carol was making a statement about the fashion industry at large, because fashion goods are a really weird thing. They're necessary. Every human being on earth needs them. They're practical. But unlike other practical items like a hammer, fashion depends on this idea of trends. A shirt is not created to be the most optimal, usable, durable shirt that it can be. It is created to fit within a system of trends. And that system is designed so that the object becomes less useful. It is less in fashion well before the time when the object has been physically worn out. Fashion companies continue to grow and to multiply and to produce more and more garments. By the time that Carol had started his company in 1994, and certainly by the time of this runway show in 2004, fashion companies had created literally millions of options for consumers to select from to build their personal wardrobes. And the narrative that the fashion industry pushes for its consumers is, among these infinite options, you will find perfect clothes. But this isn't true. The fashion industry creates the illusion of choice, and the customer is often left buying poorly constructed garments that are made of shoddy materials made in dangerous factories that don't pay living wages. And the clothes themselves will be rendered unwearable in less than a year because of the trend cycle. Carol references Karl Marx a number of different times in different interviews, and Karl Marx spilled an enormous amount of ink on this very topic, saying, essentially, this system is inevitable under capitalism and it is big bullshit. By calling the show Mainstream Downstream, Carol was identifying that the fashion industry at large, the mainstream, was just infinitely spiraling towards nothingness downstream. We'll likely dive into Carol's kind of unusual place within capitalism and Marxist theory stuff at large when we do an episode about Carol's work more broadly, but for now we're just going to stick within this season. Our story begins in Milan, Italy. Carol is 10 years into his business and 38 years into his life. Tailoring and leather tanning have been a part of that life since before he could read. Carol operates a company that is officially known as CCP SRL. SRL is basically the Italian equivalent of a limited liability company. So while an element of that name is for legal purposes, a bigger part of it is that Carol wants to kind of remove himself in many ways from the art that he's making. He doesn't want this to be about him, the man. This is probably also why Carol doesn't prefer for photographs to be taken of him. There are pictures of him floating around online, but the way that he wants to be represented visually is by this pattern paper cutout of his own body's silhouette. Carol's workshop at the time, which changed locations a few years later, was in an industrial building that was located somewhere in the southern part of Milan. It was formerly used as the place where the scenographs or backdrops were painted for the Milan opera. The metal runners that ran along the ceiling to hold up these massive scenographic paintings while they were being worked on ended up being very useful as a way to hold up massive pattern pieces, so the location sort of fit the bill really well. The show itself officially takes place on the Naviglio Grande, which is a canal, and specifically under the Viale Casala Bridge. Okay, so let's talk about this location a little bit. The Naviglio Grande is a canal. Like I said, canals are not naturally occurring. They sort of look a bit like rivers, but they have to be dug and maintained by people. We've used these for thousands of years for things like transportation and irrigation. The Naviglio Grande was dug in the 12th century for military defense, but pretty quickly took its place as an artificial waterway and has been used for things like transportation and irrigation ever since. At 31 miles long, the Naviglio Grande was one of the largest engineering projects of the entire medieval period. Okay, hey, I swear this is important. Stay with me here. Stay with me. The primary purpose of the Naviglio Grande is irrigation. Irrigation is multifaceted and very complicated, but the purposes for this episode are just that irrigation is moving water from the natural place that it is to another place so that you can farm there. And it is here, in the massive man-made trench for nourishment, that we find 17 dead bodies. Real quick, these episodes do take an enormous amount of work to make, and if you like what I do here, you should support the content on Patreon. There are perks to doing that, but ultimately I would hope that you would want to support my pouring time and effort into making these things possible so that I can make more of them. Link is down in the description. Buyers, press, and passersby were huddled on the Viale Casala Bridge during the hottest Italian summer in decades. As the mosquitoes and the heat tried their patience, they stood on the bridge, not even knowing what they were looking for. To be honest, they probably thought that people were gonna come like marching over the bridge and that the runway show was going to be, you know, a normal runway show on land. The show began with no music, didn't even have an announcement of any kind. The first thing that signaled that the show was beginning is an article of clothing that was not attached to a person, just a garment floated under the bridge. We see this a few different times throughout the show, garments moving solo in the water. Carol's work concerns itself a lot with this idea of garments as autonomous items that exist outside of their relationship as a tool for human use. The point here is that every garment in a Carol collection is meant to be taken on its own. There is no CCP look that you can just buy off of a mannequin. Every single garment has its own personality, and that personality is inherent inside the object. That personality of the object either clashes or it gels with the person who is interacting with it by wearing it, but the garment does not need a human host in order to realize its potential. There's one CCP fanatic that I've talked to who phrases it really well. He says that the clothes and the person are in conversation with each other. We especially see the clothes having their own life when we see the staff and the models trying to retrieve them out of the canal. So are we ready to look at some clothes? I would really like to look at some clothes. The first look with a human host is fairly simple. All white. Almost reminds me of old-fashioned pajamas, which of course it's not. The top is classic Italian shirting with immaculate attention to detail. These have 9 stitches per centimeter on their seams. 9 per centimeter, that is a lot of stitching. Second look is a leather coat. The details are somewhere between that of a duffel coat, a parka because of the drawstrings in the back, and a straight jacket with the front closure detailing here. We also have 2 very unusual styling details. The pants are tucked into the socks and the belt is just sitting over the waist of the t-shirt. We're gonna loop back to that. Let's keep moving though. The third look is more of the same. We kind of double down on the straight jacket element of the piece because it's colorized in this very stark white. The fourth look has a big old misconception in it. The necklace in this look is always like listed on Grailed and like talked about online as like the razor blade dog tag Superman manly man necklace. But I'm pretty sure it's just an old-fashioned tailoring instrument. Firstly, the exact same item is listed on this website that sells sewing and tailoring stuff. And secondly, if you're putting a massive number of seams onto a piece per centimeter, a razor blade would be actually a much more effective way of getting those seams undone if you did need to take the piece apart. I mean, if you have a seam ripper, if you've ever used one before, like you can only get like a few seams at a time dependably unless you sharpen it with a specialized sharpener. Like having a razor blade is a way quicker way, if you know how to do it, to like popping those seams undone. I'm not gonna pretend like I fully understand the nuance of this thing. It does hold a razor blade. The necklace chain definitely does look like dog tags. One side says the word Baum, which is German for the word tree, and it also says inox, which is Italian for stainless steel. The other side says CCP and the word safe. Moving on from the necklace, the fourth look shirt has this check print woven in where the lines fade out in a seemingly random way. Also, we get some shorts over pants and some Chelsea-style boots with no elastic in them. The fifth look is where we start hitting on some really crazy stuff. Obviously, we have some tailored pants that are made too long so that we get a good bit of stacking. It's obviously stacked over some boots there, so we kind of have this unusual shape near the bottom. But there's definitely this unusual tunic thing. This is actually made of rubber. Carol apparently searched for forever to find a manufacturer that would help him create rubber twine, and he eventually found one after being laughed out of some other factories for suggesting the idea of rubber twine for clothes. Number 6, another all-white look. Here we have some combo of a hoodie and a blazer. The Kanga pocket is, to me, what kind of makes this a hoodie, and the fact that it's a popover. And then the lapels seem to be the thing that sort of ground it as being at least influenced by blazers. This one in particular seems bizarre and kind of funny. Like it sort of seems to have like kind of a sense of humor about it. Okay, so far are we noticing that this lookbook is kind of plain? Like if you didn't have the context of this like incredible runway show and the massive influence of Carol Christian Poell, I'm not sure if these looks would be particularly exciting. Carol talks about this specifically. Quote, "Often a single piece doesn't have a loud voice in fashion, but only gets given a message through the styling and the connection with the show. In the showroom or out, it's unrecognizable then, and it's a very usual jacket. That's not the point with my collection. That's the reason why it doesn't matter if someone is not wearing the complete outfit. I think you can recognize from the fit, and the color, and the workmanship that it is not a common jacket and that it has my own personality. The point is that it's just kind of like, this isn't a common jacket. This isn't a common shirt. These things are unusually well made. These things are made with experimental technique." He's basically saying, I don't need to make them wear goofy bowler hats in order to communicate that this is a really unusual collection. It is an unusual collection. Seventh look shows a jacket that seems to be detachable near the bottom, along with a heathered rubber top and another very strange belt. This time the belt on the outside makes a little bit more sense. It seems to be placed like that for the purposes of showing how the tension in the rubber knit kind of folds up. Yeah, those folds that it's creating are pretty huge. Eighth look is where some secrets get revealed. Guess what? The belts are rubber bands. There is no buckle on this belt, and in the case of this one at least, it even looks like a rubber band because of the color. I also have a top with some taped seams. This is actually like one of the most appealing looking pieces in the entire collection to me. Like I would love to own that top. In this look, we get a really good detailed shot of the rubber knits. As we take a moment here, let's reflect on how painful this would be to wear without an undershirt, and especially how painful it would be to take off if it is soaking wet. Ouch. 10th look, here we have some classic tailoring with some unusual details like the way that this top buttonhole and the lapels are interacting. A lot of CCP heads will tell you that the core of Carol's business is the tailoring. This and the other suiting is made of a cotton mohair. Cotton and mohair being blended together, that's a very difficult blend of suit to find. They definitely exist outside of CCP, but again, it's an unusual one. You see another belt. This one could be leather, but I'm honestly just gonna guess that it's a rubber one. The brightness of the color on the belt, it just seems like you could achieve that color so much easier with a rubber rather than trying to do it onto leather. Next, we see another taped seam shirt, another pair of shorts over trousers, and a more familiar Carol piece, some derbies. These do seem to be an anomaly though, because most of the derbies that we're familiar with from Carol have no toe cap, and many of them have this wrinkled effect, which I assume is from object tanning the shoes. But these do have a toe cap, and they're just smooth leather. Another weird detail is that they don't seem to have an outer sole, and they don't have a heel on them. I won't pretend like I know why that is, but it's definitely worth noting. I don't think it's a stretch to say that most shoemakers would look at that and say that this shoe is not sellable, it's not complete. Carol's footwear is notoriously, and it's believed to be purposefully made to be uncomfortable. That would be the problem with not having a sole on the shoe, is that they would, first of all, split really easily, and secondly, like, that would compromise so much on the comfort. You would be like slamming a hammer against your heel. Like, it would be very painful to walk in that. But again, your feet are in conversation with the shoes. The shoes are not there to serve your feet. Oh, I love this stuff so much. Outside of the shoes in this one, I really do like how the taping of the seams gives this textile a really interesting character. It looks very broken in, even though it's largely unused, and I think that's because of the tension that's being caused from those taped seams. Look 9 is weird and awesome. We've got this suspenders shirt, shirt spenders? I think it's supposed to look like a swimmer that's toweling off, but also it's suspenders. It seems to even be made of terry cloth. An interesting thing to note here is that the clamps on the top seem to imply that the top is dependent on a pair of pants, that the functionality of the clamp implies pants. This is strange, at least to me, because of Carol's typical insistence that the clothes are not meant to be necessarily paired together into a full outfit. So we kind of have some interesting back and forth, a little bit of tension there. Also, maybe, possibly, this could be a play on a priest's stole. This is like the symbol that the priest has the ability to absolve sins, and I'm not really sure how that would fit into the overall theme of this collection, but then again, you know, I'm not really sure how rubber bands fit into this collection, so I'm just kind of seeing stuff and telling you what I see. We are also further emphasizing the rubber band idea with actual regular sized rubber bands around his waist, and a very cool rubber band bracelet. We have another full rubber sweater. This one is interesting because it seems to kind of match so closely with the floating weeds in the water. Makes me wonder if that one was purposeful. Not a whole lot is new on this next look other than the fact that we have a cool variation on the rubber belt. Next, we have a fairly standard outfit. I'll take this time then to point out that it's possible that these socks are being emphasized because they too might be made of rubber. I have no evidence of this, but I can't think of another reason why they would want to emphasize the socks like this. Tucking these tailored pants into the socks, it's like, why would you do that? If not for the fact that the socks are, for some reason, very special. And the very special thing in this collection seems to be rubber. Now, if we zoom in really closely on the socks, that does not look like rubber to me at all. That looks like wool or cotton or something, but that's my best guess, is that they're made of a very, very fine rubber twine. Next, we have another shorts over pants look. There's one source that indicates that there's transparent horse leather at some point in this show, and these shorts seem to be the most likely item for that fabrication. In the final look, we have another tailoring piece. All things considered, this is probably the most middle of the road look. An interesting thing to note is that I believe the suspenders are actually attached to this tank top. The final product for this collection had attached suspenders to it, so I feel like this probably was that idea in a more thorough way. Just from looking around online, there's a few other pieces that were sold as part of the men's Spring/Summer 2004 collection, and I wanted to take a bit of time here to show those products. This is, of course, not a complete list. This is just stuff from around the internet on Grailed and previous listings on eBay and stuff that people have posted to Style Zeitgeist, etc. The most interesting one of all of these is what's called the tape lapel blazer, which is just that. It's a blazer with a lapel that appears to be made out of tape. We saw the tape motif used with the tees, but this is kind of almost funny. That seems to be a big part of Carol's work that goes overlooked, is this humor thing. It wasn't a huge part of this collection. I mean, again, there were one or two things that I pointed out that were kind of silly. But I mean, this man has made a leather penis holster condom thing. I mean, he hasn't lived his whole career just being overly self-serious about himself. It's entirely possible for him to sew a joke. It's also worth noting here, a pretty interesting fact is that these models are able to look truly lifeless because they have flotation devices that are strapped to their backs. It's also worth noting that there were no rehearsals for this runway show at all. What we see in the footage is the models and the staff's first time attempting this show. The immaculate precision in the manufacturing was cast into chaos as they threw 17 guys into the canal and hoped for the best. There also seems like there's some latent symbolism in the fact that these clothes would have been ruined as soon as they hit that water. It's possible that Carol was re-upping his resolve about the garments being individual and separate from the people who are wearing them, that perhaps he's asking the question, the clothes are ruined? They're ruined for who? The jacket is still a whole object. It is still living its life. It may be different than the way you would want it to be, but that jacket is not ruined. A canal is a pretty apt metaphor for what Carol does in this collection. Canals are made with sweat. When the need is there to go against the natural system, it takes an enormous amount of work and engineering to do so. The Naviglio Grande is a canal that's used for irrigation. It brings water to nourish farms. This incredibly fucked up system that we found ourselves in fashion is only going to be combated by people who are willing to say, I'm willing to give up a lot of things in order to do this thing differently. Carol is showing in the Naviglio Grande on purpose. He himself is fashion's canal. The water was stuck. It was way out here. But in order to do something different, in order to push civilization forward, to bring water to Milan, Carol had to dig a canal. He had to pull himself out of that mainstream, and he had to sacrifice in order to do something differently. In order to have this level of focus on the details, in order to do production in the way that he does production, these things take enormous sacrifice. Carol has a quote where he says, to create something new, there should be some kind of suffering. You should always give it a little piece of yourself. You should absolutely go join the motherfucking Patreon, support this so that I can make so much more of it, definitely doing more Carol episodes. You should join me on Instagram and Twitter, it's super fun. Make sure you dig around if this is your first video that you're watching. I have analysis episodes on Kiko Kostadinov, Rick Owens, Raf Simons, Iris Van Herpen, Comme des Garçons. I've done a ton of stuff. I have a huge series on Margiela. We're covering every runway show that Martin ever made. Like, shit is crazy, go dig around. I love you all so much, geez, like a lot. Bye.